is one of the nation's most highly respected and in-demand conservative political commentators. Get a load of this, folks. His legendary lecture to the Heritage Foundation, which Andrew Breitbart called at one time one of the 5 most important conservative speeches ever given. Andrew Breitbart said that, and that remains some 10 years later the single most viewed lecture in Heritage Foundation history. How awesome is that? Evan is the author of the best-selling book, The Kindergarten of Eden. Just got my autographed copy yesterday, by the way. How the Modern Liberal Thinks, and has appeared regularly on Fox News, Cowboy Logic Radio, our show, the Dennis Prager and Michael Medved shows, and, of course, Rush Limbaugh has called him brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our friend and fellow Bruce Springsteen fan, Evan Sayet.
Thank you so much. And this is truly a great conference, is it not? Thank you for allowing me to participate. I never quite know how to start these talks because having given that lecture to the Heritage Foundation 10 years ago, I started to get emails soon thereafter saying, do you know what you have there? You've got the unified field theory of liberalism. Once you understand what I said in that original talk, you understand everything that has baffled us about our friends who vote Democrat. You know, they're not stupid in the general sense, right? They're not evil. They're not. So why is it that so many people that we know, loving, caring, generous, otherwise smart people like my cousin, why is it they ignore the facts, reject reason, and invariably side with evil over good, wrong over right, ugly over beautiful, profane over profound, and failure over success? You know, we've seen it in everybody's talk here tonight, whether it was Dr. Pry a moment ago. The modern liberal is not only always wrong, he is always as wrong can be. Everything he believes is diametrically opposed to the truth and always to the benefit of the evil, failed, and wrong. I'll give you just 2 examples, one domestic, one foreign. But how does anybody look at Ferguson, Missouri, Michael Brown, and see a man who is a career thug who had just strong-armed a local business owner, a minority, by the way, who was high on drugs, walking down the middle of the street, who punched a cop, tried to take his gun and kill him with it, and decide that the problem was that the cop is a racist? How do they think? All right, let me give you one more example, and then I will give you the answer to this. And the answer is what made that original talk go so viral, the single most viewed lecture in their entire history, because I answered this question. I'll answer it for you today. But on the international scene, how do you look at the Middle East with this tiny liberal democracy, lowercase l, lowercase d, of Israel, this good and wonderful nation that is everything liberals are supposed to love? In addition to freedom of speech and freedom of assembly and so much freedom of religion, that the Muslim holy site, the Dome of the Rock, actually has place of pride above the holiest Jewish site. How do you look at this tiny, wonderful, liberal democracy of Israel with its gay pride parades and its woman prime minister back in the 1960s? And as a liberal decide that the problem in the Middle East is not Islam, the most homophobic, xenophobic, misogynistic, and I do believe just a little bit anti-Semitic ideology on the planet today, and decide the problem is not only the Jews, but the Jews are so bad that it's the only nation on the entire planet that they want to boycott and divest from and to strangle to death economically are the Jews of Israel. Not only always wrong, but as wrong can be, the Obama administration lifted sanctions on the Iranians, while the people on the left want to put sanctions on the Jews. They are not only always wrong, they are always as wrong can be. And in that original talk, I explained why, and I started to get these emails that said that I have the unified field theory of liberalism. So when I had the opportunity to sit down and write the book, The Kindergarten of Eden, How the Modern Liberal Thinks, I wrote it as a scientific report. And there are 4 laws and 3 corollaries to this unified field theory of liberalism. For our sake, so I can go on to other material as well, it's only the first 2 laws that are essential. I'm going to give them to you how they're written in the book, and then I'll explain. The first law of the unified field theory of liberalism is that the modern liberal, that's anyone born after World War II, getting worse with each successive generation as the contact with the last of the great generations wanes. So it's getting worse with each successive generation. The modern liberal was raised to believe that indiscriminateness is a moral imperative because its opposite is discrimination. In the 1980s, by no coincidence, when the first babies born after World War II, who became the children of the 60s, who became the powers that be in academia and education and media and the Democratic Party and entertainment, in the 1980s, thinking was outlawed. It was deemed by these new powers that be to be a hate crime. Here's the thinking behind the outlawing of thinking. Anything that you believe, anything that I believe, anything the people at home believe, anything anybody believes, is going to have been so tainted by your prejudices. Prejudices we all have. Prejudices we can't help but have. Prejudices based on things like the color of your skin, the nation of your ancestry, your height, your weight, your sex, and so on. Anything that you believe is going to have been so tainted by your prejudices that the only way not to be a bigot is to never think at all. If you notice, every Democratic Party policy is the policy of indiscriminateness, open borders. You do not discriminate about who comes into your country. Abortion on demand at any time for any reason. Any family structure, any marital structure, any gender. It's all about not discriminating between right and wrong, better and worse, truth and lies, beautiful and ugly. But it's actually the second law of the unified field theory that's essential. Because right now, not thinking should lead the modern liberal to sometimes be right, sometimes be wrong, most of the time fall somewhere in the middle. Why is it then that they are always not only wrong, but as wrong can be? It's the second law of the unified field theory of liberalism. Again, I'll give it to you as it's written in the book, and then I'll explain. Indiscriminateness of thought does not lead to indiscriminateness of beliefs. Indiscriminateness of thought leads invariably, inevitably. There's no place else it can lead them to but to siding with evil, failure, and wrong. Why? Because if nothing, no culture, no religion, no form of governance, no familial construct, if nothing is better than anything else, success is unjust. Right? Why should a person, a culture, a religion, a nation, why should something succeed if it's not better than anything else? The same point, but in the inverse, to the modern liberal, to the indiscriminate, failure as proved by nothing other than the fact that it has failed. Failure is proof positive that somehow the failure has been victimized. Right? After all, why should a person, a culture, a religion, a nation, why should something fail if it's not worse than anything else? Simply by extension, if success and failure is proof of injustice, great success and great failure is proof of great injustice. And ultimately, exceptional success and exceptional failure is proof of exceptional injustice, at which point the social justice warriors jump into action, and out of a sense of justice, they must tear down what is exceptionally good, what is exceptionally successful. You know, we wonder why it is, of all the nations on this planet, there are 2 that the modern liberal hate. There's America, and there's Israel. Are these 2 nations really the worst nations on the planet? Are they really the way that the leftists portray them? Quite the opposite. The hatred that the left has for America and for Israel comes from the fact that these 2 nations are the best nations on the planet. They are the most successful nations. They are the most prosperous nations. They are, in their way, given how tiny Israel is, the strongest nations, able to fend off all those enemies around them, and it's Israel's success that proves their evil. So these people who claim that Israel's committing genocide, nothing could be further from the truth. The population in the Gaza Strip has actually multiplied since Israel took control from Jordan and from Egypt of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. It's the worst genocide in the history of the world. Apparently, Jews are great at everything except genocide. That they're not so good at because the population has actually grown in these areas. And liberals who call for Israel's strangulation know this. That's what's going. But the key to liberalism is you're not allowed to know what you know. Because that would require thinking, that would require discriminating thought, that would require comparisons. And so if Israel and Islam, Judaism and Islam are equally good and equally right, how do you explain Israel's phenomenal success? Conversely, how do you explain Islam, especially in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, how do you explain Islam's total failure? There's only two possibilities. Either those two religions are not equally good and equally right, and if you believe that, you're no longer a liberal. But if you start with the idea that you're so open-minded, you're so liberal, that you're not going to recognize better and worse, then the only explanation for Israel's success is that somehow they've cheated. And because they are the most successful nation, successful peoples in all of human history, save for Judeo-Christian America, they must be the greatest injustice in all of human history, and then they work backwards to make up whatever facts they need in order to support their preordained conclusion that the exceptional success of the Jews must be because they've somehow cheated, and the exceptional failure of the Islamic world must be because somehow they've been cheated. Similarly, and I'll get to the United States in a moment, I hear my voice is cracking. It's from a combination of speaking so often and having battled this flu that I no longer have. Don't worry, it's been a while. So you can all kiss me later, but don't worry about it. But similarly, let me go on. Similarly, how do you explain if America isn't exceptional? And Barack Obama, the president of the United States, was asked, do you believe in American exceptionalism? And he gave a very clever, very politic answer in which he said he did. But then made very clear right afterwards what he meant was he didn't. Right? What he said was, do you believe in American exceptionalism? He said, I do. Just as I'm sure the Brits believe in British exceptionalism and the Greek believe in Greek exceptionalism. In other words, he doesn't believe America is exceptional because of our Judeo-Christian heritage, because of our unique constitution, because of our Protestant work ethic. If he believes America is exceptional in law, it's because he roots for the home team. He's from here. If he lived in Greece, he'd think Greece was exceptional. Wherever he lived, it's a matter actually of prejudice. If you think America is exceptional, you're prejudiced because you live here. But if America isn't exceptional, how are people like Barack Obama and those who share his ideology to explain America's exceptional success, America's exceptional prosperity, America's exceptional strength? There's only two possibilities. Either they are a reflection of and a consequence of our exceptional culture, which, by the way, can then be emulated by others. But if you don't believe America is exceptional, then the only explanation is that not only is America a cheater, we're imperialists and we oppress, but because we are the most prosperous, most strong nation in all of human history, we must be the greatest injustice, the greatest oppressors, the greatest imperialists of all time. And then once again, they work their way backwards, they invent the facts. That's how they get from America, this is the truth, being the least imperialist major power in all of human history, to somehow we are the most imperialist power in all of human history. Not just wrong, but diametrically opposed to the truth. I want you to think about this. When Japan was the world's only superpower, they tried to take over the world. When France and Napoleon were the world's superpower, they tried to take over the world. Germany and Adolf Hitler tried to take over the world. The Romans tried to take over the world. After World War II, not only were we the world's only superpower, but our shores were pristine. Our factories were working at full bore. Europe was decimated. Asia was in ashes. Africa was, as always, a non-starter, or an S-hole, as it might otherwise be known. But let's call it a non-starter because I don't want trouble. But the Muslim world was, as always, primitive and violent. And here we were, we held in our hands after World War II a weapon so powerful that we could have gone to any nation around the globe and said to them, we're going to take you over or we're going to use this. And not only didn't we take over the world, we didn't even take over Canada. Right? We didn't take over Mexico, which, by the way, would be very easy to do now. There's nobody left there. But that's what the left does, is they ascribe nefarious and evil explanations for our success. I love this one. We are successful and other nations are failed because we use 2/3 of the world's energy. To which I say, of course we do. We have plugs. Right? We have things to plug into those plugs. And the reason that we have things to plug into those plugs is not because we stole them from other nations. Right? We don't have cable television because we stole it from the Sudanese. Right? And I'll tell you this, the Sudanese don't have cable, not because we stole it from them. The Sudanese don't have cable because when you're hacking off the heads of 1 million of your citizens, chances are one of them may have been the cable guy. But it's always got to be something. Is that for me? That's so great. Thank you. I had no idea my voice was cracking this badly because I was in the other room with Trevor, so I didn't get a chance to say a word. It's funny. He won't get the joke. Don't worry. All right. So the question is, if the modern liberal is as stupid as I believe him to be. And by the way, forgive me for calling them stupid, but they think we're stupid. And I understand why they think we're stupid. It's because they're stupid. But if the modern liberal is as stupid as I believe him to be, how does he keep rising to the tops of his professions? Right? I mean, whatever you believe about Nancy Pelosi, the woman was, not that long ago, the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. Right? Whatever you think about Wolf Blitzer, the man is a nationally known news person. Whatever you think of Henry Gates, the man is a tenured professor at Harvard University. If the liberal is as stupid as I believe him to be, how does he keep rising to the tops of his professions? And then it dawned on me. Liberals reach the tops of their professions because they enter only those professions where you don't ever actually do anything. Right? Every one of the professions that we associate with liberalism, journalism and academia and entertainment and politics, is all talk, but no action. And the thing is, when you don't do anything, you don't need to know what you're talking about. Because when you don't do anything, what can go wrong? Right? So the liberal flocks to academia. Why? The academic doesn't do anything. It is so obvious that the academic doesn't do anything that the very name of his profession, academia, has become a synonym for not doing anything. As in, it's all academic anyway. Let's go do something. The job of the academic is for somebody who doesn't do anything to lecture to children who don't do anything about the people who do things and did things and the things that they did and they do. Right? The liberal flocks to journalism. Why? The journalist doesn't do anything. It is so obvious that the journalist doesn't do anything that you could remove their bodies and they would still be able to do their job, which is why they're known as talking heads. The job of the journalist is for somebody who doesn't do anything to report to the people who do things. The things that the other people who do things were doing, well, they were out doing things. Why do you think the news was always on at 6 o'clock? Because that's when the people who do things came back from doing those things. The modern liberal flocks to government. Why? They don't do anything. The job of the government is for people like Barack Obama, who have never done anything, to order the people who do everything to stop doing anything the way that they do those things. And the great irony is if the people who do everything don't listen to the people who have never done anything, then the people who have never done anything will put the people who do everything in jail, where they won't be able to do anything. But where they will meet another Democratic Party constituency. And of course, the liberal flocks first and foremost to my industry, showbiz. Why? Because in showbiz, we don't do anything. The job of the actor is to pretend to be doing the things. And the job of the actor is to pretend to be doing the things that the people who do things do. So when the people who do things finish doing those things, they can go to a movie because it's something to do. The actors all talk, but no action. Which is interesting because in order to get the actor to start talking, the director yells action. But the second there's any action, they send the actor back to his trailer. And they bring in a stuntman. Now, virtually every stuntman in Hollywood is conservative. Why? Because the stuntman knows how to do the things the actor's only pretending to know how to do. Now, you know that showbiz is a liberal profession because one of the most important jobs in that profession is the reviewer. Right? What other profession do you need somebody to interpret the work to find out if it's good? Right? You don't have reviewers for plumbers. Is he a good plumber? I don't know. Does the sink run? You know, is he a good pilot? I don't know. Does the airplane land? If your sink doesn't run, he's a bad plumber. You don't need some interpreter, some reviewer to come in and say, well, yeah, the sink doesn't run, but that's his homage to the dryness of the soul. You know how you know showbiz is just a ridiculous profession? It's the only profession out there where you actually can yell, cut, take two. Right? You don't have a thoracic surgeon, oh, I just nicked the artery. Cut, clean up, take two. Right? If you can yell, cut, take two, you're not doing anything that matters. And what's funny is it's the only profession in the world where you actually have children. Right? Child actors. You don't have child surgeons. I want you to meet your surgeon, Billy. You wouldn't go to them. They actually have animal actors. It doesn't take that much to be an actor. They have, you know what the most popular movies are today? Animated movies. We don't even like the actors. We prefer a drawing of an actor. But have pity on the reviewer, and here's why. Think about what a sad human being a movie reviewer must be. I mean, this is a guy who night after night, week after week, month after month, year after year, goes out and sees all these actors, all these people on the giant screen being paid millions to do nothing. All that while knowing that not that long ago, he too aspired to do nothing, but he just wasn't good enough. Now, of all the people who do nothing, it is almost universally recognized that the smartest is the stand-up comedian. Right? See, what makes us so smart is not only don't we do anything, but we do it next to no time. As my friend Rich Voss would say, I've got the only job in the world where you say to a friend, I got to go to work. I'll be right back. But still, every once in a while, there are better and worse comedians out there. I think Jerry Seinfeld is great. Right? But even Jerry, when they gave him $1 million a week to write a situation comedy about his life, even he had to admit it's a show about nothing, because what else could it be about? But here's the thing. Here's the difference between the left and the right, and it's not necessarily found in what we do for a living. Obviously, there are conservative comedians. There are conservative entertainers. There are conservatives in journalism. There's conservatives in, what am I leaving out, academia. No, the difference between the left and the right is not found only in what we do or we don't do in our jobs. More importantly, it's found what we do and we don't do with our lives. And here you've got to give the liberals some credit. We can now agree that in their jobs, liberals do absolutely nothing. But with their personal lives, some liberals have been known to do 2 or 3 times that amount. Yes, my humor requires math. You can do the math. But that's the thing, because here is the difference between the left and the right. Excuse me. Because we recognize the better, the existence of right and wrong, good and evil, better and worse, beautiful and ugly, exceptional and unexceptional. Because we engage in discriminating thought, we spend our lives trying to better ourselves. We try to better ourselves as parents. We try to better ourselves as citizens. We try to better ourselves in the eyes of God. But because the left doesn't believe in the better, they can't seek the better. They can't seek to better themselves. In fact, they are taught from the time they're young, don't better yourself, just be yourself. It's a big difference between being yourself and bettering yourself, and that's the difference between the left and the right. Because how much intellect and effort can it take to just be yourself? Hey, whoa, I was just myself. And you would think, right? But you would think that they would love people of religion because we do try to better ourselves, but they don't like that at all. Where are my Catholics? Are there Catholics here? Yeah. You know what I love about this moment in my talk? At this moment, you have no idea what I'm about to say. You're even a little afraid I might offend you. But here's the good news. If you're really a good Catholic, you're going to have to forgive me. But here's what I love. You guys didn't even wait until you were born to start being yourselves. You guys were yourselves in the womb. And you would think liberals would love you for that, because what is the womb? Basically, it's a liberal paradise. Basically, you're sitting in a hot tub, feeding off of somebody else. But liberals don't love the Catholics, do they? They hate Catholics. These open-minded people, again, you think they're against religion. They're not. They don't hate Islam. They hate Christianity. They hate Judaism, because combined, Judeo-Christianity has created the most successful, most wonderful, most exceptional nation in all of human history. Right? And you would think that they hate the Protestants too. And first and foremost, and I do believe my people are finally starting to see this, but first and foremost, as I pointed out earlier, liberals hate Jews. And I know the reason they hate Jews. It's twofold. First of all, it's because the Jews gave us the 10 Commandments. And the liberal looks at the 10 Commandments and goes, my God, if I can't lie, if I can't cheat, if I can't steal, how will I ever be myself? Right? And it's because the Jews gave us the Bible. And I am absolutely convinced that every single liberal was just terrified. There's another word for it. Sent into shock. They were, the first time they opened the Bible and they saw there was an entire book spelled J-O-B. Because none of us in my industry and in the liberal-dominated industries actually works for a living, and we know we don't work. We don't even call what we do work. We call it play. Right? Bruce Springsteen plays the guitar. Susan Sarandon plays a role. Ask Bill Maher where he was last week. He'll tell you he was playing Las Vegas. Right? Adam Baldwin, not Adam Baldwin, he's the good one. Alec Baldwin, he's the bad one. Alec Baldwin, when he's not berating his children on the phone, do you guys know what I'm talking about? Right, he left that message. You know the really galling part? As always with him, that was the 7th take. But Adam Baldwin will, when he's not in Hollywood, he will be in a play that's playing in a playhouse. We know that what we do is play. And that's why my book is called The Kindergarten of Eden, How the Modern Liberal Thinks. And it actually is a bit more serious than this talk has turned out to be. But nonetheless, it's not only liberalism in America, it's liberalism, period, as an ideology that is infantile and failed. All right, I started out on the left, and I wasn't a doctrinaire or a thoughtful leftist. I don't believe there is such a thing as a thoughtful liberal. In fact, I have an expression, the first time you think is the last time you're a Democrat. But one of the things that I came to and has given me so much joy, and it's a word you never hear from the left, is gratitude. And there's a reason for that, and that's because gratitude is the antithesis of entitlement. You can't be grateful for what you've been entitled to, or you can be as angry when you haven't gotten everything you think you are entitled to. So I actually have an exercise that I engage in just to remind myself to be grateful. Every morning, the first thing that I do when I wake up is I go over to the computer. And I stop for a moment, and I say, thank you, boys and girls at Apple. Or thank you, boys and girls at IBM, 2 American companies. And then I turn it on, and the operating system comes up. And I stop for a moment, and I say, thank you, Steve Jobs. Or thank you, Bill Gates, 2 Americans. Then I click on the internet, and I stop for a moment, and I say, thank you, Al Gore. What, you don't think Al Gore could have invented the internet? Why not? He invented global warming. Here's what I don't get about global warming. 2 things. First of all, living in Hollywood, being near all these mansions in Malibu that all these liberals own. If they really believe the oceans are rising, why do they all live on the beach? And here's the thing. They tell us that we're something like 6 years or 60 years or 100 years away from the oceans rising. What do they say, 2, 3, 4 feet? Which means that in 100 years, your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren might have to take their beach blanket and go like this. But when I talk about all these things, that it dawns on me that every single thing that I use in my day to make myself a better person, to make myself a better writer, to make myself to give myself conveniences in my life, was either invented in or perfected in America. Whether it's the automobile that I drove to get here or the radio that I listened to in the car, whether it's the internet, as I pointed out, or my computer, whatever it is, everything that has made my life better was created or perfected in America. Name me one thing that you use in your daily life that comes from France. Anybody? Water, bottled water, cheese, and wine. All right, they didn't invent any of those things, and 2 of them are nothing other than food that went bad. Right? They're so lazy, they just sat there watching the food rot. Finally, they got so hungry. Ooh. All right, guys, I'm getting ready to go. Before I do you guys have any questions for me? Anything you want to know? Anything I've not yet talked about? No? Well, it depends on who sees this. Could be soon, could be never. We'll see. Where will I be playing? That being said, let me just finish up with some good news, and there's a couple of pieces of good news. One, America is not divided in 2. We are divided in 3. All right, there are those of us who get it, that right and wrong, good and evil, better and worse, Exceptional and unexceptional exist. And we recognize that America is exceptional. And we seek to conserve those things that make America exceptional. That's why we're called conservatives. Right? All the way on the other side are these people that we see much too much of because they have much too much power in media and elsewhere on the news. But there aren't all that many of them who really do hate America and think we're this horrible, evil, racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic thing. Most people, though, who vote Democrat don't vote Democrat. In fact, even living in Hollywood, I don't know anybody who votes Democrat. What I know is a lot of people who vote against the Republicans. And they do so because those powers that be have so succeeded in demonizing us, in villainizing us, that basically their election argument, their campaign argument is, of course we destroyed Baltimore. Of course we destroyed Cleveland. Of course we destroyed California. Of course we destroyed, what am I leaving out, Chicago, right? Of course we destroyed St. Louis. But hey, look over there. It's a racist. And they have so cowed us, especially in some industries, including my own, that we don't speak up. We're afraid of losing our jobs. We're afraid of losing friends. We're afraid of even physical attacks because they are a violent ideology. And so we don't speak up, but we have to speak up because the vast majority of people who vote Democrat do so because they have never heard from a conservative what a conservative believes. Where would they have heard it? On the nightly news? Where would they have heard it? In their classrooms? Where would they have heard it? Where would they have heard it? So every one of us has to redouble our efforts to speak up and be heard. All right, so I have a program I call Adopt a Democrat. And you've got to think about it like you're adopting a child because they are children. What's funny about it, they know that they're children and they take pride in the fact that they're naive and innocent. Right? There's even a book called All I Ever Need to Know I learned in kindergarten. They know that they're children. Right? This is why Jimmy Carter doesn't call himself James. Right? Right? This is why Jesse Jackson talks to them in rhyme. Right? Do you remember Mayor Nagin, the New Orleans mayor, who tried to lure people back to New Orleans? Do you remember what he promised them? No. He promised them it would be a chocolate city. I want you to do that so they didn't think I was making it up. It's so ridiculous. But he promised them it would be a chocolate city filled with cupcakes and sweets and all kinds of treats. Do you know where you've heard this story before? The story of evil people trying to lure children to Candy Island? It comes from Pinocchio. And do you remember what happened when all the children got to Candy Island? They all turned into donkeys. So I want you to find one person in your life who you know isn't a hate America, always leftist, who has just never heard from us what we really believe. And I want you to adopt them. And it's like adopting a child. One thing that we do wrong is we think we're talking to adults. And we know that we are so right on every issue, and they're so wrong, that if we just talk to them, they'll get it. And so we almost browbeat them. We just want them to get it so badly. But that would be like if you had a child and you made everything a teachable moment all the time. Your child would hate you. Your child would stop listening to you. So this takes years. Right? But over the course of time, have fun with them. Love your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues, whoever they are. But when they do something particularly egregious, when they say something like, I can't believe that guy made that film that got our ambassador killed, that's when you spank them. And I'm telling you, over the course of time, you will change people. I have changed people. I have changed a ton of people through this method. It's frustrating because it takes long, but think about this. If every one of us changes just one person, we double our numbers. Right? All right, guys, thank you so very much for listening.
Look, you grow up in the area and the time and the place that I did, and the demographic Jew that I did, and liberal is not an intellectual position. It's what my friend Andrew Breitbart would call the default factory setting. All right, you just knew growing up basically everything that liberals tend to know, which is that Democrats are good and Republicans are evil. I'm good. I must be a Democrat. I must be a liberal. You know, Democrats like peace. Republicans like war because war is good for business. Well, I like peace. I must be a liberal. You know, Democrats like the air. Republicans don't like the air. They pollute the air. They don't breathe the air. You don't think it through. You just know that Democrats like the environment. Well, I like air, so I must be a Democrat.
Right.
Then I call myself a 9/13 Republican. All right? 9/11 didn't surprise me. All right? Obviously, I didn't know the date. I didn't know the target. The carnage sickened me. But even as a brain-dead liberal, I knew just enough about the world to know that the same people who were murdering the Jews of Israel for no other reason than they were the closest infidels, right? Who were murdering Hindus in India for no other reason that they were the closest infidels, who were murdering children in Beslan, Russia, for no other reason they were the closest infidels, would, when they could, come and kill the big infidel, the great Satan. Right? They just had these big oceans they couldn't cross. So when these attacks took place, what really surprised me were not the attacks, it was the liberals' response to the attacks, that we provoked them. You know, in the words of Jeremiah Wright, President Obama's spiritual mentor, that it was the chickens coming home to roost. Right? There was a college professor who was teaching that we deserve, all of us deserve to be burned alive in our places of employment because every one of us is a little Eichmann, the architect of the Holocaust. And there was no outrage. In fact, not only was no outrage from the left, but this professor, Ward Churchill, actually got more invitations to speak on college campuses after he said that. This boggled my mind. I mean, aren't these the people we're supposed to, as liberals, hate the most? Religious fanatics who murder innocents? And here they were making the most ridiculous anti-American statements, and I had to figure out, one, where do I go to find an ally? Because it really doesn't matter where you stand on abortion if you're dead. I knew we had to fight Islamic fascism. Now that it was here in our country, we had to fight it. Who were going to be my allies? So I went to a Republican meeting expecting to disagree with them on everything, expected them to be everything that I was taught they were, bigots and racists and homophobes and xenophobes. And you know what? They actually had the most articulate and thoughtful reasons for everything they believed. It dawned on me, I don't know a Democrat. I don't know a single person who votes Democrat. What I know is a lot of people who vote against Republicans because Republicans are evil and homophobe and xenophobe and Nazis and fascists. And no matter how bad the Democrats are, well, they're not going to vote for Hitler.
Right.
When you see people making stupid, factually incorrect arguments about things they know. Trayvon Martin was an innocent child gunned down by a white man. Oh, he wasn't white, a white Hispanic. They edit the 9/11 tapes. Why? Why do they lie on behalf of this thug? All right, why? How do you look at the Middle East? All right, and you see this tiny and wonderful liberal, lowercase l, lowercase d, liberal democracy of Israel surrounded by misogynist, homophobic, mass-murdering, corrupt terrorists and decide to boycott Israel. How do you look at the facts? Now, you can look and say, well, some of them are Marxists and they're trying to overthrow Western civilization. My cousin's not a Marxist. My cousin hasn't given it enough thought. He hasn't read Das Kapital and decided, okay, that's the ideology. So how is it that they blind themselves to the fact? He knows Israel's a liberal democracy. He knows the Muslim world is as horrific as it is. How does he come to this conclusion? And I was able to answer this in a way that rocked the conservative world. Chris, when I went to Washington, D.C. to do the Heritage Foundation, I went as a political unknown into a town where everybody gives a speech every single day. Everybody writes an article and so I went in as a television writer, and I gave this talk, and it was taped. And one person saw it and said, my God, that's Sunday. And sent it out to people. It's NRO, National Review Online, said at a certain point, this talk by Evan Sayet, and they linked to it, is cramming our inboxes. Please stop sending it. Because it laid out, and other people called it this. I borrowed this phrase later. But I would say 20 different people would email me, strangers, and say, do you know what you have there? You've got the unified field theory of liberalism. You have just explained everything. And once you know what's in my book, once you know what's in it, everything falls into place.
Okay.
Right? The way it's written in the book is the first law of the unified field theory is the modern liberal, and that's somebody born after World War II through today. The modern liberal was raised to believe that indiscriminateness is a moral imperative because its opposite is discrimination. In the 1980s, the first children born after World War II, the hippies and the children of the 60s who then became the college professors and the entertainers in the 80s. In the 1980s, thinking was outlawed. It was.
Well, at least critical thinking.
Well, right. It was deemed a hate crime. And the concept behind it is anything you believe, Chris, anything I believe, anything your director believes, your camera person believes. I almost said camera woman. Wow. Your cameraman. Ooh,
no differentiating.
That's exactly right. The discriminating thought, no differentiating. Anything that you believe, anything I believe, anything anybody believes is going to be so tainted by our prejudices. Prejudices we all have. Prejudices based on the fact that you're a man, that you're tall, that you're short, that you're rich, that you're poor, that you're white, that you're black. Anything you believe is so tainted by your prejudices that the only way not to be a bigot is to never think at all.
Well, or not to think in a way that's contradictory to the thoughts of the collective.
No, not to think at all, which will lead you into the thoughts of the collective. Because the second law is indiscriminateness of thought does not lead to indiscriminateness of beliefs. It leads to siding with evil over good, wrong over right, to Trayvon Martin over George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman.
Good Hispanic name.
Yes. Well, that's why they thought they had themselves a Jew.
Yes.
That's honest to God. That's why the media went nuts about this. They thought they finally found a Jewish murderer that they could use to show, see, every religion kills.
Yeah.
But it's the reason they support the Islamists over Israel. Because the second law is, if nothing is better than anything else, if no culture is better than any other, then success is unjust. Great success is a great injustice, and long and sustained success is the greatest injustice of all. If there is no difference, you're just not allowed to recognize the difference between Islam and Judaism, then how come the Jews have Tel Aviv? How come the Jews have symphony orchestras? How come the Jews have all of this? And the Palestinians are mired in crap. If it's not because Islam did it to itself and Judaism built this, if they're equally good because you're not allowed to believe, not to think which one's better, then the Jews must have stolen their success and the Palestinians must be oppressed. That's all they need to know. The Jews are successful, the Palestinians are failed. It can't be their culture, so it must be an injustice. And since the Palestinians are hugely failed, and the Jews are hugely successful, that injustice must be huge, which is why they single out Israel. It's not because Israel's the worst nation, it's because they're the best. They're the most successful.